What's up guys, my name is Ace, and a very hot topic in the community right now for Black Ops 7 is the matchmaking situation, because many have been claiming that this style of matchmaking doesn't match their experience from the open matchmaking in the beta build of the game, and also therefore doesn't match their experience with pre-Modern Warfare 2019 CODs, where skill was a minimally considered factor. Now, as much as I'd love to do a very detailed scientific breakdown collecting data on all of this, unfortunately, this isn't something I feel comfortable testing with any sort of accuracy when it comes to collecting empirical data, simply because there are far too many variables at play, combined with the fact that we don't have access to the API, so we can't look up all the players' stats in our lobbies. As a result, we're gonna have to get a little more anecdotal here, and this is basically what I'm gonna be doing throughout the video, is just sharing what my experiences are and what I feel may be happening with the matchmaking. But I just want to be clear right up front, these are just my thoughts and experiences, and I know experiences with this can vary quite a bit from person to person. Also, as always, when looking at a topic like this, I do try to approach it from different angles and different perspectives, and I have been seeing a lot of really flawed testing methods on both sides, from people saying that this is absolutely the classic matchmaking and it's very minimally considered skill, versus the other side where people are making claims that this is even more strict than we've been seeing in the past 6 years, or it's the exact same matchmaking we've been seeing for the past 6 years. And as always, I tend to fall somewhere in between those extremes because there's often a lot of nuance to this conversation that I feel people on the extremes tend to ignore. But let's start it off with, in general, just where I stand when it comes to this. How am I feeling about the matchmaking in its current state in the game, now that we played for an entire weekend at this point, had a decent amount of playtime, and I played around with different modes as well as different team compositions and stuff? How are things feeling for me? Well, from my perspective, interestingly, when I play entirely solo with nobody else joining me, my experience has been generally quite mixed, with a bit of a lean in the direction of more difficult than average lobbies. And that's at least roughly what you would expect when skill is minimally considered. I think that's a key point that many people are missing here when people are saying they claim there'd be no SBMM, but clearly there's SBMM present, they lied to us. No, they've always said it's minimally considered, and therefore it is present at least to some degree, and if you're a very good player with very good stats, you're more likely to play in more difficult lobbies than people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum that are maybe not very good players. However, the key difference here is that it's meant to be a lot less strict than it's been in recent years, and therefore you should see a better mix overall with just, again, a little bit of a skew in the direction of your skill level. And as I said, while playing solo, for the most part, that's what my experience has been. I've played in several really easy lobbies where I'm kind of just stomping on people. I've played in some extremely difficult lobbies where I'm practically getting stomped on, or at least my team's getting stomped on super hard, and I'm just barely keeping my head above the water. And then I played in tons of matches as well, where it just seems like there's a mix of players within the lobby, where I'm clearly seeing that some players on the enemy team are just not very good players at all, but I'm also seeing one or two beasts on the other team in that same match. And overall, that's pretty much what I expected going into the open matchmaking, with skill being minimally considered. And I've actually been quite happy with it overall, although the team balancing can feel pretty oppressive at times as well, where I can be absolutely going off in a lobby, but still losing the game. But that's certainly not new to Call of Duty. However, my experience when partied up, even if I just have one other person join me in the lobby, and it seems to be regardless of their skill level as well, it's suddenly like I'm playing an entirely different game the moment I do that. And by entirely different, I mean far more competitive and extremely strict when it comes to the matchmaking. In fact, when partied up, I feel like my matchmaking over the weekend has been more difficult than previous years when partied up. And for those that don't know, one of the big ways I've adapted to the matchmaking system over the past several years, like since Modern Warfare 2019, is I realized if you just party up with at least 4 to 6 players, then the modern matchmaking system generally doesn't feel all that bad, because you're just going to be such a dominant force as a team that you can generally overpower that matchmaking system, as well as the team balancing. I think that's a big key as well. It just prevents all of the worst players from ending up on your team. And that's where I found the most enjoyment over the past several years, is when I party up with viewers. And again, it has to be like at least 4 to 6 players so that we really have enough to overpower the system and not allow the team balancing to compensate for that. In Black Ops 7 though, the weird thing is, like I said, when I party up, I suddenly feel like I'm playing in a tournament, and nearly every match becomes so incredibly difficult, and we've even been totally stomped on as a team of me and viewers while I'm streaming. And I've even noticed while partied up with viewers, we tend to lose far more often than we win. And that's the complete opposite experience over the past several years of Call of Duty when partied up. It would be very rare that we would ever see a loss. And in general, that's really where I'm at when it comes to my experience with the matchmaking. Solo has genuinely felt quite good for me, but playing with literally anybody else in my party makes for a totally different experience that is generally far worse. Now again, this is anecdotal. I don't know if there's actually something that they tuned here that really pushes parties into playing with other parties or just really messes with the matchmaking to make it so much more strict than it would be if you weren't partied up. And I mean, if they did do something like that, on paper at least, I'm okay with the general idea of doing that, trying to match parties with other parties to help insulate the majority of solo players so they're not playing against 6 stacks as often while playing solo. That actually sounds pretty fair to me, and I like the idea behind that, but with my experiences, it feels like they've cranked that up to the maximum, to the point where it's just no longer an enjoyable experience at all while partied up, and it's far more fun to play solo. So as of right now, I'm at the point where I really don't want to party up with anyone. I kind of feel bad for my viewers because I always love playing with viewers while I stream. It gives you guys a chance to interact with me a little bit more, and I know a lot of people enjoy playing with me, but as it is right now, it just seems to be making my experience so much worse, and therefore I plan on sticking to solo only, at least for the foreseeable future. So with that in mind, I did want to talk about some of the discourse I've been seeing online, and I think some flawed testing as well. One big thing I've been seeing people do is reverse boost or start a brand new account and then compare the experience on those accounts with their experience on their very high-skilled main account. And then, of course, when doing this, they show that they're getting absolute bot lobbies when they reverse boost compared to their main accounts, which are playing in much more difficult lobbies. And then many of them are using that as evidence that, see, they lied to us. There's definitely skill-based matchmaking present. Again, just a reminder, skill is minimally considered, but it is still present, just like it was in pre-Modern Warfare 2019 Call of Duty games. And also, just like in those older Call of Duty games, reverse boosting was absolutely a thing. You could 100% reverse boost into a protected bracket all the way back to Black Ops 2 and get like the easiest bot lobbies you've ever seen. And I distinctly remember that was a very common accusation as a YouTuber. Anytime you'd have a really good game, you would see those accusations flying around like crazy that you just reverse boosted for that lobby. So the fact that reverse boosting works in these open playlists isn't really good evidence of anything, because even if matchmaking is identical to a pre-Modern Warfare 2019 Call of Duty game, you would end up seeing the exact same results in that game's lifecycle when reverse boosting. Now on the flip side, I've also been seeing a lot of pushback against anybody that has been saying that the matchmaking does feel very strict, and that they have been having a very difficult and quote-unquote sweaty experience with the game. And I have been seeing a lot of them say like skill issue, or this just proves that you've been protected by matchmaking all these years. And while I do think this is true in a lot of cases, I think some people are realizing now that they have actually been protected in recent years, and they're now seeing a totally different tier of players than what they're used to seeing. At the same time, a lot of these complaints about this are coming from truly high tier players. Like sometimes it's content creators that just play at a very high level, and I know them, I've seen them play, I've played against them at events. I know they are absolutely very good, like outlier level players, and I've even seen some professional players mentioning that the matchmaking feels very strict. And if a professional player is stating that, I tend to take their word for that, because I'm pretty sure they haven't been protected by the matchmaking system in recent years when playing pubs. Now, after my experiences, I am really curious to know how many of these people that are mentioning that the matchmaking feels overly strict, I'm curious to know if they've been partying up as well, and maybe they're seeing a similar thing, or if they're having this experience while solo. And one of the big problems with people just sharing their experiences with this is everybody's experience is going to be inherently different due to a wide variety of factors outside of their actual skill level. Like, of course, skill level comes into play, but also the region you live in and the time of day that you play, that also has a huge impact on the types of lobbies that you'll experience. So I think it is also possible that some really good players aren't really experiencing super strict matchmaking just due to where they live or the time of day they play, whereas others that are maybe a comparable skill level to that same person are having a totally different experience due to their region and the time of day that they play. And again, this just reiterates the fact that testing all of this empirically would be essentially impossible. I know a lot of people wanted me to do some SBMM testing, but without that API available, it's just not viable at all. I will say one type of test that I like the most, at least for this, even though it's not perfect by any means, is the time to matchmake test. I do believe that this can be used at least to some degree to judge whether the matchmaking system is as strict as recent years or not. And again, at least while playing solo, my experience with this has been, if I'm searching for the open mosh pit versus the standard mosh pit, I did a few tests with that, even though I'm not really playing in that mosh pit, I'm not interested in playing in that mosh pit. When I search for the standard mosh pit, I get very similar matchmaking times to what I've been used to in recent years with Call of Duty, and that is, it usually takes about 45 seconds to a minute to get me into a lobby on average. Whereas when I search for the open mosh pit, I'm generally getting into games significantly faster than that. Not every single time. Sometimes it does take a little bit longer like that, up to around a minute. But for the most part, I'm getting into matches within 20 to 30 seconds. And that's been practically unheard of on my account in my region over the past 5 or 6 years of Call of Duty. It's been very consistently about 45 seconds to a minute on my main account. Although interestingly with that, when I tested with my dummy account that I use for private match testing, anytime I would do matchmaking tests, I would generally get into lobbies significantly sooner in recent years. So really long matchmaking times can be an indicator of, first off, region, second, the number of people that are searching for that particular playlist, of course, and third, your skill level. If you're a real outlier player, you should be seeing much faster matchmaking times on average in the open mosh pit compared to the standard mosh pit. And if you are, to me, that's at least some evidence that suggests that they're not using the same matchmaking across both. I know some people have been claiming that they rug pulled us on this and the matchmaking in the open mosh pit is identical to the standard mosh pit. Maybe that's the experience they're having, and maybe the matchmaking times they're experiencing suggest that as well. But again, for me, I've had the opposite experience there, and I've mainly just been having an awful matchmaking experience anytime I party up with anyone. But there we go. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. I definitely feel like something is off with matchmaking, particularly when playing in a party. It definitely doesn't feel like the old school classic matchmaking when doing that. But as a solo player, it has on average felt fairly similar to that. Maybe not quite as open as back in the day. I don't really know. Maybe they have tweaked something behind the scenes, but it has definitely felt at least a lot more open than recent years while playing solo. Now, of course, those are just my experiences. You might have had a totally different experience, and that's why I want to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How has your matchmaking experience been so far with Black Ops 7, particularly in the open playlists? Although if you wanted to share your experience with open versus standard, I'd love to hear that as well. If you enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.